Welcome to the Deep Dive, the shortcut to being the most informed person in the room. Today, we are wrestling with a global dilemma. It really sits right at the intersection of life, death, and technology.
hmm
We're taking a pretty dramatic leap forward, trying to predict the world of 2050 to confront one of the most, well, persistent and frankly heartbreaking crises in modern medicine, the wait for a life-saving organ.
It is definitely a crisis.
Ah,
And it's defined by some really staggering numbers. The
yeah.
gap between the need for organs and the actual supply, it just keeps widening.
Yeah.
If you look at the United States, say, right now in the mid-2020s, you've consistently got over 100,000 patients just waiting, languishing on these transplant
You're at
lists.
100,000. That's just huge.
It is. And the grim reality, the sort of unavoidable truth of that scarcity is that roughly 20 people die every single day in the U.S. alone, just because an organ didn't arrive in time for them.
20 a day, that's hard to even comprehend. And when you zoom out, look at the global picture, it gets even worse, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It magnifies the problem. So in 2023, yeah, we celebrated about a 9.5% rise in procedures, which sounds good.
Right. Progress.
But the total number of transplants performed globally,
Yeah.
only 172,000.
Only compared to the need.
Exactly. It's a success, yes.
Yeah.
But it's still just a tiny, tiny fraction of the global population suffering from end-stage organ failure. The demand profoundly, almost terrifyingly, exceeds the supply.
And it's not getting better on its own.
No. And crucially, the pressure is actually mounting. That demand curve, it's steepening fast. And it's driven largely by two big things. Populations getting older globally, and this explosion in chronic, non-communicable diseases.
And like diabetes, heart disease, the things that just wear organs down over time.
Precisely. Those conditions relentlessly lead to organ failure in so many people.
So that's the stark reality we're facing. Our mission today isn't just to describe this problem, though. We want to frame the solution, or at least the potential solutions. We're taking a deep, detailed shortcut, jumping ahead to 2050, to examine how these revolutionary advances in biotechnology promise to fundamentally transform the whole treatment landscape.
Yeah.
Could they actually eradicate that wait list altogether?
And as we, peel back the layers of the source material we looked at, it becomes really clear. The future, it hinges not just on the brilliant science, the breakthroughs in the lab,
Right.
but just as much on massive shifts in policy and economics and, importantly, in ethics. We absolutely have to address the governance side, the societal side, just as much as the bioengineering if we want this future to be, well, equitable.
Okay, let's unpack this right away then. Who is actually going to be receiving these revolutionary new organs in 2050? Because the profile of the recipient, who even gets considered a candidate, that's changing dramatically, even now.
It really is, and it's a demographic story first and foremost.
Yeah.
We're seeing global life expectancy just keep rising. It's creating what sociologists call graying populations,
More older people.
a lot more. The sources we looked at emphasize that by 2050, for the first time ever in recorded history, the number of people globally over the age of 65 will actually outnumber those under 35.
Wow. That's a staggering inversion. I mean, just think about the implications. More older people means, well, more people reaching the age where organs naturally wear out or finally succumb after decades of chronic illness.
Precisely. And transplant centers, they're already responding to this shift.
Yeah.
We saw data back from 2012 showing that recipients over age 60 already made up something like 20% of heart and kidney transplants.
20%, even back then.
Yeah. But here's the really crucial data point, the one that kind of challenges the old way of thinking. The outcomes for carefully selected seniors, they're already comparable to younger patients.
Okay, that's a huge takeaway. I think a lot of people might miss that. It's not just that older people are getting on the list, it's that in many cases they're getting the same long-term survival.
Often, yes. The same 5-year survival rates. For example, heart transplant recipients who are aged 60 to 69, they've shown 5-year survival rates pretty similar to those aged 18 to 39.
That's incredible.
It is. And this excellent clinical data, it provides the foundation for that 2050 projection with better immunosuppression drugs, tailored maybe for older immune systems, and just more refined pre- and post-op care. Transplant candidacy is going to expand significantly.
So we're talking about, what, routinely considering fit 70-year-olds? Maybe even older?
Yeah, septuagenarians, possibly beyond.
Yeah.
Moving decisively away from just blunt age cutoffs and looking more functional age, biological age criteria. How fit is this person really?
And this expansion, it leads directly into this philosophical shift in how we even select patients, right? Because today, centers are forced into what you called scarcity triage. Organs are so rare, the criteria have to be incredibly strict.
And severe.
Mm-hmm. Current criteria, they often exclude patients who have significant comorbidities, things like severe obesity or active infections, or maybe underlying vascular diseases, because the priority has to be maximizing the success rate of that single precious donor organ.
So if someone's deemed less likely to survive 5 years, they might not get the organ to save it for someone with a better shot.
Often, yes. That's the hard reality of scarcity. Save the organ for someone with a higher probability of long-term success.
But, and this is the big but, if the new technologies we're about to get into, the xenografts, the lab-grown stuff, the artificial devices, if they really alleviate that shortage, we shift from scarcity triage to what, abundance triage?
Exactly, abundance triage. And that changes absolutely everything.
How so?
Well, the source material projects that by 2050, if supply is abundant, or at least much more plentiful, the criteria could broaden dramatically. This means potentially including groups who are currently often excluded.
Like who? Give us some surprising examples. Well, maybe patients with controlled HIV. Or perhaps even patients with certain localized, low-grade metastatic cancers, provided the transplant offers a significant improvement in their quality of life and longevity.
Wow.
The ethical mandate sort of shifts, you see, from maximizing the graft's survival to maximizing the individual's benefit.
And this selection process, this triage, it won't just be doctors sitting around a table anymore, will it? It's going to be optimized by tech.
That's where precision medicine and AI come in, big time. Instead of relying on, a checklist of comorbidities, AI systems will allow for these deeply personalized risk assessments based on an individual's unique molecular profile, their genetics.
So much more nuanced than just age or diabetes.
Much more. It refines suitability with an accuracy humans just can't match, making sure the right patient gets the best functional life expectancy from whichever organ source is available, whether that's human, animal, or artificial.
Okay, but this abundance, this transformative shift, it's probably not going to be spread equally around the globe, is it? At least not right away. We have to talk about that global gap.
Yeah, that's critical. What's fascinating and also worrying is the potential for new tech to either close that gap or potentially widen it dramatically.
How's it look now?
Currently, access is intrinsically linked to income. High-income countries perform the vast majority of transplants. They have the infrastructure, the surgeons, the long-term drug coverage, the ICUs.
Everything you need for these complex procedures.
Right. And we also see a difference in the causes of organ failure. Poorer regions often struggle more with the aftermath of communicable diseases, like viral hepatitis leading to liver failure, whereas wealthier nations are dealing more with those chronic, non-communicable diseases, the diabetes, the hypertension, wrecking kidneys and hearts.
But you said the global landscape is shifting.
It is, rapidly. Middle-income countries, especially massive emerging economies in Asia, Latin America, think China, India, Brazil, they are rapidly expanding their own indigenous transplant programs. And that development is already boosting global transplant volumes significantly.
Okay, so if capacity is increasing globally, why the concern about the gap widening?
Because these advanced therapies, they're going to be astronomically expensive at launch. Bioengineered organs, personalized gene therapies, even the first-gen xenografts, they'll initially be concentrated in wealthy nations for insured populations.
So if these breakthroughs become the new standard, they risk becoming a luxury commodity.
Precisely, accelerating a global disparity in health outcomes. You end up with a world where your survival depends even more starkly on where you live and how much money you have.
Which leads to that idea you mentioned, medical alienation. People in poorer regions knowing a cure exists, maybe one that targets their specific disease risk, but they just can't get it.
Yeah, that breeds deep resentment. It fuels demands for healthcare justice. And avoiding that outcome, it requires proactive policy intervention now.
Like what kind of policies?
We need things like mandatory tiered pricing models for these new techs, strong international humanitarian programs, maybe funded by global health organizations, policies encouraging intellectual property sharing, maybe, to ensure these novel organ replacements eventually transition from being a luxury to a globally accessible standard of care. It's a huge challenge.
Okay, this is the core of our deep dive. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's look in detail at the four main tracks of innovation. The things that could, if they pan out, genuinely kill the organ waitlist.
Right. The big four.
Let's start with maybe the most controversial, but perhaps the one moving fastest right now. Xenotransplantation, using animal organs.
Xenotransplantation, yeah. Primarily pig organs, which are genetically engineered to function and, crucially, survive inside a human recipient. The progress here driven mainly by gene editing tools like CRISPR, has been astonishingly fast.
We all saw the headlines in early 2022 that first pig heart transplanted into a human patient. Now, he only survived 2 months, I believe.
That's right, 2 months. But the procedure itself proved the fundamental concept was viable. It could be done. And the engine behind this rapid progress, as you said, is CRISPR.
Why is CRISPR so essential here? What was the old problem?
The old problem was hyperacute rejection. Historically, the human body would launch this massive, immediate immune attack against a pig organ, within minutes sometimes.
Okay.
And that attack is triggered by specific sugar molecules on the surface of the pig cells. They're known as GAL epitopes. They basically scream, "foreign invader," to our immune system.
So what does CRISPR do to solve that?
Well, scientists use CRISPR first to knock out the pig genes responsible for making those GAL epitopes, get rid of the main red flag.
Okay, makes sense.
But they don't stop there. They simultaneously add human genes into the pig's DNA to promote compatibility. We're talking about adding human regulatory genes, like one called CD47. It essentially acts as a "don't eat me" signal to the human immune system's macrophages.
So it's not just making the organ invisible, it's actively telling the human body, hey, I'm okay, leave me alone.
Precisely. It's a dual approach. We're seeing companies like Egenesis, United Therapeutics, developing pig kidneys with dozens of these gene edits, sometimes up to 69 edits.
69 edits in one pig's genome. Wow.
Yeah, to make them functionally and immunologically optimized for human use. And get this. The source material noted that as of 2025, the FDA had already approved initial clinical trials for these heavily gene-edited pig kidneys in patients with end-stage renal disease.
That's huge, moving out of just pure lab experiments into actual human trials.
Exactly. That level of regulatory approval suggests we are definitely moving beyond a purely experimental phase.
So the 2050 goal then is
What?
routine off-the-shelf supply. You need a kidney, here's one from a pig.
That's the vision. An instantaneous supply of kidneys, hearts, livers, ready when needed. By 2050, we expect to see maybe second-generation xenografts, even more genetically optimized, and a crucial regulatory challenge absolutely has to be met, ensuring the source pigs are free from any viruses that could jump species.
Right, the zoonotic risk. Things like PRVs, porcine endogenous retroviruses.
Exactly. We need robust screening and maybe even herd immunization of the source pigs to eliminate that risk. That's non-negotiable for safety.
But wait, let me just push back slightly on the ethics here. We're talking about breeding sophisticated animals specifically to harvest their organs. Do we actually have long-term outcome data yet? And how is the ethical thinking around animal welfare keeping up?
That is the absolutely necessary caveat. We lack long-term data. We simply don't know how a pig organ performs in a human body after 5 years, 10 years, especially under continuous immunosuppression. And ethically, the debate is fierce. But the emerging consensus, particularly among regulatory bodies and many ethicists, seems to be prioritizing the immediate preservation of human life, provided that strict, humane guidelines for the breeding, care, and treatment of the source animals are rigorously developed and enforced. Animal welfare is a key part of the ethical equation.
Okay, it's complex. Let's move to the second track. Bioengineered organs and 3D bioprinting. This is kind of the dream scenario, right? Organs on demand, maybe even made from the patient's own cells.
This is often called the Holy Grail, exactly because it could bypass rejection completely. If it's made from your own cells, your body sees it as self.
And we've already seen some success with simpler structures.
We have foundational successes. Surgeons have successfully implanted bioprinted bladders, tracheas, even ears, made using bioinks containing patient cells. But the real engineering mountain to climb is the complexity of solid, dense organs like the heart, liver, kidney.
And that complexity boils down to the plumbing, right? The vascular network.
Exactly. To function, a heart or a kidney needs to be instantly perfused with blood and oxygen the moment it's implanted. We're talking about building this incredibly intricate network of blood vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries that needs to be structurally sound and immediately functional.
That's been the big hurdle, getting blood flow deep inside.
That's been the primary technological hurdle, yes. Often leads to the center of the bioprinted tissue dying off, necrosis, because nutrients can't get there fast enough.
Yet the prototypes are showing some astounding progress.
They really are. Researchers have successfully 3D bioprinted a functional beating rabbit-sized heart with 4 chambers, rudimentary vessels, the works.
A rabbit heart.
Yeah. And even more incredible, maybe, is the work by United Therapeutics again. They created a human lung scaffold. The source material highlighted this. It contains an estimated 4,000 kilometers of capillaries and 200 million air sacs. the alveoli.
4,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
That's like the distance from London to Baghdad packed into a lung structure. It just blows my mind, the microscopic complexity.
It's mind-boggling engineering. Now, experts caution we're probably still 20 to 30 years away from fully transplantable, human-sized, complex organs like that lung. But that timeline puts us right at the edge of clinical deployment by 2050.
And which organ might be first?
The smart money is likely on kidneys, given they're the most urgently needed organ globally and structurally, maybe conceptually, a bit simpler than the liver or the constantly beating heart.
And the huge benefit of this approach, just to reiterate, is if these organs are built from the patient's own cells.
Zero immunological rejection, which means potentially no need for lifelong immunosuppressant drugs.
And that changes everything for long-term survival. Instead of a decade or two, maybe the organ lasts a normal human lifespan.
That's the true disruptive potential. It completely changes the long-term outlook for recipients, a massive game changer.
Okay, track 3 offers a slightly different angle. Stem cell-derived organs and regeneration. This isn't just about building replacements outside the body, is it?
Right, this focuses not just on building replacements ex vivo, but also on potentially regenerating the damaged organ in vivo, inside the body, healing from within.
We hear a lot about scientists growing organoids in petri dishes, these mini organs, but the research is also exploring things like human-animal chimeras. That sounds wild.
It does sound like science fiction, but early experiments have actually shown some success. Researchers, I think it was Stanford back in 2022, demonstrated that human stem cells can survive and even begin to differentiate into specific human tissues when they're injected into very early-stage pig or primate embryos.
Whoa. So the idea is to use the animal as a kind of living bioreactor to grow a human organ.
That's the controversial goal, yes.
What are the hurdles there? Besides the obvious ick factor for some people.
Immense regulatory and ethical hurdles. Preventing the human cells from differentiating into, say, complex brain structures or reproductive tissues within the animal host is a massive challenge. We absolutely do not want human consciousness developing in a pig, for example.
No, definitely not.
So because of these really significant constraints, the source material suggests that the more likely 2050 application is focused on localized repair using stem cells.
Okay, give us an example of that. Localized repair.
Think about heart failure. Instead of trying to replace the entire complex organ, maybe scientists could use lab-grown patches of functional heart muscle, cardiomyocytes derived from stem cells. Inject those directly into the damaged area to restore function.
Sort of like patching a tire.
Kinda, yeah. Or for type 1 diabetes, using stem cell-derived pancreatic islet cells to replace the ones that aren't working, effectively curing the condition and delaying or completely avoiding the need for a full pancreas transplant down the road. It's more about preemptive maintenance or targeted fixes.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, let's look at artificial and bioartificial organs. These are the machines, the permanent devices that could eliminate the need for any biological donation at all.
This track is all about creating durable, fully functional machine substitutes that could be implanted in the body. We've already seen the evolution of VAD's ventricular assist devices.
Right, the pumps that help a failing heart.
Exactly. They started out mostly as temporary bridge-to-transplant devices, just keeping patients alive until a human donor heart became available.
But now they're aiming for permanent use.
That's the goal. Companies like Bivacor and Carmat are developing these next-generation total artificial hearts, or TAHs. They're designed for long-term, permanent replacement. So these devices could offer a solution for patients with end-stage heart failure who might be too sick or otherwise ineligible for a biological transplant.
A purely mechanical heart. And what about kidneys? That's the biggest need.
The most exciting development there is probably the Kidney Project out of UCSF.
What are they working on?
They're developing an implantable bioartificial kidney.
Oh.
It's really clever. It combines a silicon nanopore filter, which handles the mechanical filtration of blood like a dialysis machine,
Okay.
with a separate biocartridge containing living human kidney tubule cells. And those living cells handle the crucial metabolic functions, the reabsorption, the fluid balancing that current machines just can't replicate.
So it's a hybrid. Part machine, part living tissue.
Exactly, a bioartificial hybrid.
And the benefit. Why is this such a big deal?
It's designed to work continuously, 24/7, just like a natural kidney, which could potentially free patients entirely from those large, inconvenient dialysis machines by 2050.
No more dialysis sessions 3 times a week.
Imagine the cost savings to the healthcare system, the incredible improvement in quality of life for patients, and the fact that they wouldn't need a donor kidney anymore. For the most needed organ globally, this is potentially revolutionary.
So if we put all these four tracks together, the xenografts, the bioprinting, the stem cell regeneration, the artificial devices, the future of transplantation in 2050 isn't just one thing. It's looking like a really customized, mixed ecosystem, isn't it?
Absolutely. A toolkit, the right solution matched to the specific patient, the urgency, the type of organ failure. It's about having multiple options to end the wait list.
Okay, that's an excellent transition point. Because for all the excitement about these amazing replacement technologies, we're still fundamentally treating the symptom, right? Organ failure.
Mm-hmm.
If we really connect this to the bigger picture, the truly paradigm-shifting approach is making those replacement organs obsolete in the first place, curing the underlying cause of the failure.
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal of regenerative medicine. In situ repair. Stimulating the failing organ's own natural repair mechanisms, maybe using targeted gene therapies, maybe injecting engineered cells to help rebuild healthy tissue right there from the inside out.
So instead of replacing a failing kidney, you fix it.
That's the idea. Think about organs failing due to specific genetic defects. We could potentially use gene therapy to halt the progression of something like polycystic kidney disease, maybe with a single one-time gene edit given early in life before major damage occurs.
That moves medicine from treatment way upstream to prevention.
Totally.
Mm.
Robert Langer, the famous biomedical engineer, framed this perfectly. He basically said, if we can develop the ability to make a kidney from scratch, you wouldn't have to do a kidney transplant. But the ultimate goal isn't just synthesis, it's healing the original organ.
Which brings us straight to how tools like CRISPR and the concept of immune tolerance could transform things even for people who do get transplants. Gene editing isn't just about curing inherited diseases before they cause failure.
No, it's also about making any transplant that does happen last much, much longer, improving the outcome of existing procedures.
How does gene editing achieve that? Immune tolerance.
Well, right now, transplant recipients have to take these cocktails of powerful immunosuppressant drugs for life. And these drugs are, frankly, toxic.
Yeah, they have serious side effects.
They do. They suppress the entire immune system, which increases the risk of life-threatening infections, certain cancers, and ironically, they can even contribute to long-term graft failure over time.
So what's the gene editing solution?
The idea is to use precision editing, maybe on the recipient's own immune cells, like their T cells, before or after the transplant. Editing them to induce tolerance, essentially teaching those immune cells to recognize the new organ as self and not attack it.
So by changing the recipient's immune system, the organ isn't rejected, and maybe the patient doesn't need those heavy-duty drugs, or needs much lower doses.
That's the goal, reduced or even eliminated need for immunosuppression. That means fewer side effects, less risk of post-transplant cancers, and critically, drastically improved long-term graft survival. Gene editing could make existing transplants much more durable, which itself reduces the demand for retransplantation later on.
Okay. And finally, in this prevention space, we have the power of just knowing things earlier. Proactive analytics, precision medicine, AI-driven prevention, shifting the whole game towards prediction.
Yeah, leveraging advanced genomics and AI in 2050 could allow healthcare to be far more proactive, less reactive. Patients who are at a high risk of organ failure, maybe they have a known genetic predisposition to cardiomyopathy or certain kidney diseases that could potentially be identified decades earlier.
How?
Through comprehensive omics profiling, combining their genomic data, proteomic data, proteins, metabolic data, building a really detailed picture of their long-term risk.
So instead of waiting for a crisis and then intervening, they get a personalized lifetime management plan.
Precisely. AI-driven models could guide that plan, suggesting precision diets tailored to their profile, optimizing medication regimens, maybe even suggesting the exact right timing for preventative interventions.
Like starting a VAD early if a heart is showing subtle signs of failing, or doing a preventative shunt surgery for someone with developing liver disease.
Exactly. It's about using data to stop acute organ failure from ever catching patients or doctors off guard, managing risk proactively over a lifetime.
And even when a transplant is the best option, AI could radically improve how organs are allocated, taking some of the human error or subjectivity out.
Yes, AI using machine learning can match donors and recipients far more intelligently than humans can today, looking way beyond just basic blood type and size matching, delving into complex molecular and genetic compatibility factors.
Why is that better?
Because it's driven by an ethical imperative. maximizing the total life years gained from what might still be a finite supply of, say, human donor organs.
So instead of just a simple match or no match, the AI might run millions of simulations.
Potentially, yes, to predict the outcome. For example, it might predict that this specific donor kidney has a 90% chance of lasting 12 years in recipient A, who has an excellent genetic match and profile, versus maybe only an 8-year expected survival in recipient B, who has significant underlying health issues or a less optimal genetic match.
And that influences the allocation decision.
It could, yes. The decision is then scientifically optimized to maximize the overall societal benefit, the total number of quality life years gained, which of course adds immense pressure for policymakers to ensure these powerful algorithms are fair and transparent, a point we definitely need to explore next.
Right. The science is just breathtaking, honestly. But if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it really feels like the science is advancing maybe faster than the governance, the rules around it.
That's a very common theme in biotech, yeah.
These non-science factors, the policies, the money, the ethics, they're ultimately going to determine who actually gets access to this incredible future we're painting.
Absolutely. The policy decisions being made today are really the crucible shaping organ replacement equity for 2050. We have to start with the supply of human donor organs, because even with all these new technologies, human organs will likely remain crucial for decades to come.
And the big debate there is still opt-out versus opt-in donation systems.
It is. And the evidence for opt-out or presumed consent is pretty compelling. Countries like Spain, which combine an opt-out system with really robust transplant coordination infrastructure, they achieve amazing donor rates. Something like 43 donors per million population, PMP.
Wow. Compared to the U.S.?
Compared to the U.S., which was around 26 PMP back in 2016, using an opt-in system, opt-out demonstrably increases the donor pool significantly.
So by 2050, what do you think we'll see in countries that have historically been hesitant about presumed consent, like the U.S. or U.K.?
We'll likely see more countries moving towards hybrid models, trying to find a middle ground. One approach is mandated choice. That's where citizens are legally required to state their preference about donation, yes or no, whenever they do something official, like renew a driver's license or passport.
Yeah.
It forces a decision.
Okay.
Another model that's seen success is Israel's priority system. Basically, it gives registered organ donors or their immediate family members priority on the waiting list if they ever need an organ themselves.
Ah, interesting. It incentivizes altruism without actually paying for organs.
Exactly. It rewards the willingness to donate without crossing that line into direct cash payments.
Which leads us right into the most, well, incendiary topic in this whole area, the question of organ markets and compensation. The current international consensus bans buying and selling human organs, mainly driven by that very real fear of exploiting the global poor.
Right. The fear that the rich would just buy organs from the desperate.
But there is that one unique, heavily scrutinized exception we have to mention, Iran.
Iran, yes. They established a state-regulated kidney market decades ago, and the sources confirm they successfully eliminated their kidney wait list entirely by the late 1990s.
How does their system work?
Essentially, the system pairs a willing donor with a recipient, and then a government or designated charity organization provides a standardized compensation package to the donor. The idea is it's not payment for the organ itself, but compensation to offset their lost wages during recovery, travel costs, things like that.
Okay, but I have to challenge that a bit. Even if the waitlist disappeared, the ethical criticisms are still huge, aren't they? Doesn't it still risk becoming a system where organs primarily flow from the poor to the less poor, even if the state is nominally overseeing it? Exploitation seems hard to avoid entirely.
That is the absolute central tension, and the source material acknowledges it. While the waitlist vanished, which is a huge achievement, these equity criticisms absolutely remain. The perception persists that it's still largely the economically vulnerable who feel compelled to donate.
So what's the 2050 outlook on this?
By 2050, the pressure to reconsider some form of regulated compensation might become immense if the technological solutions we've discussed fail to fully meet the overwhelming demand. Policymakers might be forced into very difficult debates about piloting highly regulated, tightly controlled market models, maybe offering fixed, ethically determined compensation as a sort of last resort measure to alleviate suffering. It's a deeply uncomfortable conversation.
Extremely. Okay, let's talk money, because the initial cost of this future is just staggering. The economics, the equity, and healthcare access, these feel like maybe the biggest non-scientific hurdles.
They probably are.
A single human transplant today costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. These new technologies, Bioengineered organs, gene therapies, they're going to be exorbitant, at least initially.
The coverage dilemma is paramount. Who pays? Who pays for a xenograft that might initially cost, say, $4 million, dollars, or a one-time gene therapy cure that costs $1 million dollars upfront?
How do you make the case for covering that?
The argument that usually wins in policy debates, eventually, is long-term cost-effectiveness. Yes, a kidney transplant is expensive up front, but it is vastly cheaper for the system than keeping a patient on dialysis for decades, which can easily cost upwards of $100,000 per year every year.
Ah, so the argument is pay a lot now to save massively more later.
Exactly. You frame it as an investment, not just an expense. We'll need specialized funding programs for these high-cost, potentially curative therapies, treating them not as a consumable cost, but as a societal investment to avoid exponentially larger chronic care costs down the line.
But getting that funding approved is tough.
Very tough. And without proactive policies, things like government subsidies, maybe policies enforcing tiered pricing for global markets, significant public investment in the required infrastructure, these advanced therapies will remain restricted to the wealthy or those in elite medical centers. That fuels massive disparity and really undermines public trust in the fairness of the system.
Finally, we need new ethical frameworks, just new ways of thinking about these novel technologies. Xenotransplantation, AI allocation, they introduce entirely new governance problems that our current laws just weren't designed for.
Definitely. The ethics around xenotransplants are profound. We touched on animal welfare, but culturally, public acceptance is also key. And we are seeing some interesting developments there, like religious consensus forming in some major faiths. Islam and Judaism, for example, have principles like pikuach nefesh, the overriding importance of preserving human life. Interpretations are emerging that suggest this principle can override dietary laws or cultural taboos regarding the use of animals, like pigs, provided it's done humanely and is necessary to save a life.
So cultural acceptance might actually move faster than some of the regulatory hurdles.
It could, potentially,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we absolutely have to govern algorithmic fairness. If we delegate the power to decide who gets a life-saving transplant to an AI based on its prediction of survival, for instance, those algorithms must be auditable, transparent, and provably fair.
What's the big risk if they're not?
The risk is encoding existing societal biases. If historical medical data shows that, say, certain socioeconomic groups or minority populations had worse long-term transplant outcomes, maybe due to lack of access to follow-up care or poor insurance coverage or systemic bias in treatment, the AI, trained on that biased data, might inadvertently learn to discriminate against those same groups. It could perpetuate and even magnify historical inequalities without anyone intending it to.
So we need rules, audits.
Absolutely. Policymakers have to mandate rigorous independent auditing of these AI allocation systems to ensure their predictions are based purely on objective medical suitability and not on ingrained societal prejudice found in the training data. It's a huge ethical responsibility.
Okay, we spend so much time focusing on the science, the policy, the mechanics, but what about the actual person receiving the organ? We have to explore how life, death, identity itself might change when organs are manufactured in a lab or derived from a pig. I mean, how do you feel fully human with a pig's heart beating inside you?
That is such a critical human element, and it's often overlooked in the purely technical discussions. Today's recipient psychology is already complex. It involves this blend of profound gratitude towards the deceased donor and their family, but often also a degree of survivor's guilt.
Guilt that someone had to die for them to live.
Exactly. Now, if organs come from animals or labs, that specific type of guilt might diminish. But a whole new set of identity questions emerges.
The sources mention this fascinating, though maybe controversial idea of cellular memory. What's that about?
Yeah, it's anecdotal, not scientifically proven in a rigorous way. But surveys have indicated that a surprisingly high percentage of transplant recipients, some reports cite numbers as high as 89%, report experiencing personality changes, new preferences, or memories that they feel align with their deceased donor.
Wow, 89%. Even anecdotally, that's high.
It is. Now, science generally attributes these feelings to psychological effects of the trauma, the massive life change, maybe the powerful immunosuppressant drugs affecting mood or cognition. But the subjective feeling for the recipient, the sense of having a foreign entity somehow influencing their identity, can be very powerful.
And that feeling must be potentially compounded when the source isn't even human, when it's a pig or machine.
Exactly. A recipient with a xenograft or maybe a permanent artificial heart might grapple with questions like, am I still fully myself now that a machine runs an essential part of my body? Or they might struggle with the biological boundary being blurred by having animal tissue integrated into them.
So we'll need new kinds of support.
Definitely. Psychologists, social workers, transplant support teams in 2050 will need entirely new counseling frameworks, tailored to help patients navigate these novel scenarios to integrate these foreign biological or mechanical elements into their sense of self in a healthy way.
And what about broader societal acceptance? This blurring line between human, machine, animal. Will the general public just accept it?
History suggests society tends to normalize medical advancements remarkably quickly if they offer a clear and dramatic increase in life quality and survival.
Yeah, think about pacemakers or artificial hips.
Exactly. We accept prosthetics, cochlear implants almost without a second thought now. By 2050, having a synthetic kidney or a gene-edited pig heart might carry very little social stigma, especially if the clinical outcomes are excellent.
But what if someone has multiple artificial or bioartificial organs? A mechanical heart, a synthetic kidney, maybe those bioprinted lungs?
Then that science fiction concept of being a cyborg starts to enter public discourse more seriously. How do we categorize that person? Are they still fully human? It forces society to reconsider definitions.
Okay, but one major psychological benefit we should highlight is the potential alleviation of all that weightless trauma we discussed earlier.
Oh, that is immense potential win. The existential distress, the constant anxiety, the feeling of your life being on hold, governed by the call. If weightless genuinely vanish in leading regions, that removes a massive source of psychological trauma for hundreds of thousands of people.
We come back to the disparity problem.
We do. If these breakthroughs are largely contained geographically or by income level, then patients in underserved regions could face that medical alienation we talked about. It's a specific new kind of trauma, knowing a cure exists, seeing others get it, but being perpetually unable to access it yourself. That's going to fuel massive demands for health equity and global health justice activism.
Finally, these advancements, they impact our most fundamental concepts, like mortality itself, the end-of-life evolution.
This is perhaps the deepest philosophical question raised by all this.
Mm.
If technology allows a patient to be kept alive, potentially indefinitely, with machines of permanent artificial heart, continuous blood filtration replacing kidney function, maybe sustained artificial lung support,
Yeah.
then what legally and societally constitutes a terminal illness? When is it appropriate to withdraw care if biological function can be artificially sustained far beyond traditional boundaries?
It forces us to redefine death, almost, or at least the process of dying.
Exactly. By 2050, our societal norms, our legal frameworks, our ethical guidelines around end-of-life care and withdrawing treatment will have to evolve significantly to address these new capabilities. It fundamentally redraws the line between life and biological maintenance.
So let's try to quickly synthesize the global race here and project what the most optimistic, maybe even the ideal outcome looks like by 2050. It raises that important question. What does the best, most equitable outcome look like globally?
Well, high-income countries, with their established R&D, their specialized medical infrastructure, their insurance systems, they're almost certainly going to be the early adopters of the most expensive new technologies, like xenografts and the first complex bioprinted organs.
Right. The U.S. is already pushing goals like exceeding 50,000 transplants annually by 2026.
Exactly. So by 2050, it's conceivable that these leading nations could achieve near self-sufficiency in organ supply, effectively eliminating their domestic wait lists or drastically reducing them.
And what about those big middle-income countries, China, India, Brazil?
They are rapidly building robust domestic programs right now. We absolutely expect them to contribute a much, much larger share of the total global transplant volume by 2050. Using a mix of human donation and potentially adopting some of the new techs as costs come down.
And the hope for low-income countries, what's the optimistic view there?
The optimistic view involves leapfrogging. If the cost of some of these manufactured technologies, maybe like that implantable bioartificial kidney, drops sufficiently over the next couple of decades, then these nations might be able to bypass the incredibly complex, decades-long, expensive process of setting up nationwide deceased donor coordination networks, brain death laws, ICU capacity, etc.
So they could jump straight to a technological solution.
Potentially, a manufactured organ that can be shipped, stored, and implanted maybe in a few central referral hospitals might be far more logistically and economically feasible in some settings than trying to replicate the entire Western deceased donor system.
Okay. And globally, the strategies to solve the shortage will likely converge using multiple approaches.
Yes, absolutely. The ideal 2050 scenario isn't one magic bullet. It's a convergence. You'd likely see opt-out donation policies becoming the accepted norm across most developed and many middle-income nations.
Boosting the human organ supply.
Right. And simultaneously, much enhanced use of DCD organs, which, just to clarify again, DCD is donation after cardiac death, distinct from the more common donation after brain death. DCD organs come from patients whose circulation is stopped.
And those organs have historically been harder to use because they suffer damage from lack of oxygen, right?
Yeah.
Ischemic damage.
Correct. But by 2050, their viability will be significantly boosted by advanced perfusion and preservation machines. These organ care systems basically keep the organs warm, oxygenated, metabolically active outside the body for extended periods.
Allowing more time for transport, maybe even assessment or treatment of the organ itself.
Exactly. It reduces organ waste dramatically and allows organs to potentially be shipped much further, maybe even globally, matching them to the best recipient anywhere.
And if that legal supply from human donors, animals, labs, machines starts to actually meet the demand, what happens to the terrible illicit organ trade, the black market?
Optimistically, if the legal, safe, accessible supply meets or even exceeds demand, the fundamental economic incentive driving black market organ trafficking networks should naturally dwindle. Technology, ironically, could end up being the most powerful weapon against the global exploitation of vulnerable people for their organs.
Okay, so the ultimate outcome projection for 2050, the best case scenario, is genuinely transformative.
It really is. Waitlists drastically reduced or maybe even eliminated in many parts of the world. Global transplant rates surging upwards. And perhaps most importantly, the projected 5-year survival rates for major organs, kidney, heart, liver, are expected to exceed 90%.
Why such a big jump in survival?
Mainly due to the impact of using patient-derived cells for bioprinting, or gene-edited xenografts, or inducing tolerance, all of which minimize or eliminate chronic rejection and the need for those toxic long-term immunosuppressants, which are major causes of graft failure and death today.
Wow, okay. This has been an incredible journey, really, tracing the arc of medicine from, relying purely on the kindness of strangers, human altruism, to potentially an era of manufactured, engineered, artificial life support. The future looks like this highly customized, mixed ecosystem where organs are grown, edited, or built to order.
It's a profound shift. But the ultimate responsibility, as we've said, remains ethical and policy-driven. While science might conquer the technical problem of the organ shortage, giving us the tools to eradicate the wait list, failure to address cost, access, and equitable distribution could simply create a new kind of tragedy. A world where end-stage organ disease is still effectively a death sentence for half the planet, not because a cure doesn't exist, but simply because they can't access it. Fairness and equity, those are the only true metrics of success for 2050.
That leaves us with a really provocative final thought for you, the listener, to consider. If we reach a point where we can manufacture a perfectly compatible organ on demand, maybe from our own cells, completely eliminating the need for human sacrifice and donation, does that deep societal value we currently place on altruistic donation just fade away?
What does the potential disappearance of that communal act of compassion, of giving the gift of life, mean for the spirit of community, for empathy within healthcare and society as a whole? Does something important get lost, even as lives are saved?
Something to definitely mull over as you process this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.